Welcome back to AskAPop. Today we're talking about 2 and 2. Way back in my day, am I really that old? I'd spent a whole semester in college where I'd rush home just in time to make it to the couch, and I could drop down on that couch with 2 hot dogs and some chips in time to watch the last 15 minutes or so of my buddy Chuck Woolery and him trying to figure out how to help some dudes out making a love connection right before Star Trek came on. Love Connection was the hinge of the 1980s. Man, did I just admit that I was that much of a geek? Anyway, Chuck was the king of cool, and during that show, he'd help these dudes out, trying, like I said, to woo these women into, deciding to make a love connection with him. And right before the commercial break, he'd always turn to the camera and say, "We'll be back in 2 and 2." And it'd turn his hand that funny way. It was kind of fun. Well, Chucky boy, I never wanted to go onto your show, but I did find a love connection thanks to a different Chuck, my father-in-law. And over the last couple decades, actually 2 and 2, we've been through the highest of highs, had kids in the mix, the lowest of lows with my several folks joining the Church of New Jerusalem, and just about everything in between, through sickness and in health, through richer, and that was before kids, and poorer once the kids arrived, almost always with a smile. I caught myself always looking at my beloved Tony, and literally as often as just yesterday, I'd look over at her and I just can't believe that she still chooses me and I choose her. And with both of us being very heavily involved in Christian education, one of the things that we really like to make sure and emphasize when we teach is about God's will, especially when we're teaching stuff like adoption. Because it's really easy to say things are God's will, but when you're talking about things like adoption, or like with Tony and I and Broken Roads, it's really easy to kind of slip into that, but you got to be really careful, because it was absolutely not God's will for the broken road that led Tony to me, simply because I don't think it was God's will for her to be a widow in her mid-20s. But I do think that God absolutely led a hand in leading a willing servant to help her out once she was a widow in her mid-20s. Now, just the same as Boaz was there for Ruth and Leah was there for all of us. Now, talk about a good love connection. Boaz came from Leah's line. Now that is 2 plus 2. The Bible verses today are Genesis 29 and Ruth 2. As far as questions go, do you have any fond love connections that you'd like to try to make? See you next time on 2 and 2. God bless you.